My ex-fiancée ended our relationship just a few months before our wedding because her closest friend claimed I wasn't good enough for her. Now, both of them are pleading with me to reconsider. It's hard to believe that just 3 months ago, I was preparing for what should have been the happiest day of my life with Mia, my partner of 3 years. Today, I find myself in my best friend's spare room, scrolling through apartment listings and trying to piece together where everything went wrong. Mia and I first crossed paths in 2021, and within 6 months, we were practically inseparable. After a year and a half, we decided to move in together. When Mia introduced me to her friends, most of them seemed pleasant enough. However, there was one friend, Jake, who spent the entire dinner grilling me about my background and career achievements, all while wearing a tight smile that never quite reached his eyes. I remember mentioning that I worked in digital marketing for a small local agency, and I could see Jake's expression sour slightly before he quickly masked it. Mia later brushed it off, saying he was just protective and ambitious. She insisted that he came from a social circle that valued certain achievements, but that she didn't care about that stuff. I believed her because, well, love can make you blind to certain truths. When Mia proposed last year, I was over the moon. She did it during a weekend getaway at a charming little B&B in the countryside. We agreed on a modest wedding, nothing extravagant, since we were both saving for a house down payment. However, the problems began almost immediately after we announced our engagement. Jake insisted on being involved in every single detail. At first, it seemed helpful. He had connections with vendors and offered to help coordinate since I worked long hours. But it quickly became clear that he was taking over. The venue I loved was deemed too shabby, the catering I wanted wasn't the kind of food served at their social events, and the suit I fell in love with was labeled as cheap-looking. "Don't you think?" Mia kept asking. It felt easier to go along with his suggestions than to fight him on everything. I reluctantly compromised on several things to keep the peace, but it felt like death by 1,000 cuts. Every decision taken away from me chipped at my excitement until wedding planning felt more like a chore than a celebration. The real turning point came during a dinner at Jake's apartment about 3 months before the wedding. He had invited his friends, Lisa and Marco, over, and I realized halfway through that I was being paraded in front of them for approval. They kept exchanging glances whenever I spoke. At one point, Lisa asked where I vacationed as a child, and I laughed, thinking she was joking. When I explained that my family's idea of a vacation was camping at the state park or visiting my grandparents in Ohio, the table fell silent. After dinner, Jake cornered me in the kitchen while I was helping to clean up. He started with what seemed like casual conversation about Mia's ex-boyfriend, Alex, who apparently worked at a prestigious tech firm and came from a family with connections in Silicon Valley. Then he mentioned how Mia had always been destined for great things and how he hoped I wouldn't hold her back. I felt like I had been slapped. When I asked him what he meant by that, he dropped all pretense. He told me that while I seemed nice enough, I clearly wasn't ambitious enough to help Mia's future. He claimed my lack of professional connections would eventually embarrass her in important circles and that I wouldn't know how to network properly or make the right introductions. I was so shocked that I couldn't respond at first. When I finally found my voice and told him he was being incredibly rude, he just laughed this condescending laugh and said my defensiveness proved his point. He insisted that Mia deserved someone who could match her potential, not drag her down. I walked out of the kitchen and immediately told Mia we needed to leave. In the car, I was shaking as I recounted everything Jake had said. I expected her to be outraged, to defend me, but instead, she got quiet and said he didn't mean it like that he was just worried about our future. She asked if maybe I had misunderstood his tone. That night marked our first major fight. I couldn't believe she was defending his behavior. Eventually, she admitted that Jake had been expressing concerns about our compatibility for months. Apparently, he had been filling her head with doubts about whether I was ambitious enough for the future she envisioned. The worst part was that she was actually listening to him. Over the next 2 weeks, things deteriorated rapidly. Mia became distant and started staying late at work. When she was home, she'd bring up random concerns about our relationship that had never existed before, like whether our different career aspirations would cause problems with our lifestyle or if I'd be comfortable at her company events. It all Mia. I didn't listen to the entire message before deleting it, Whatever drama is unfolding in their seemingly perfect little world isn't my concern anymore. I know this is a long update, but I needed to get it off my chest. The wedding would have been next weekend, but instead, I'm treating myself to a solo trip to a beach rental I found on Airbnb. It's not the honeymoon I envisioned, but perhaps it's exactly the fresh start I need. First update, thank you so much for all the support on my original post. The first month after the breakup was honestly a blur. I stayed on Alex's pull-out couch longer than I had planned. He's truly a saint. Every morning, I'd wake up disoriented, reaching for Mia before remembering everything that had happened. My appetite vanished, and I lost 10 pounds without even trying. Alex started leaving protein bars on the coffee table because I would forget to eat. I spent a lot of time just staring at apartment listings without actually calling anyone. Something about making that move felt so final. Alex never pressured me, but after about 3 weeks, he gently suggested we go look at a place that had just opened up in his friend's building. The apartment was nothing special, just a small one-bedroom with a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, but it was within my budget and only a 15-minute drive from work. I signed the lease the same day. Moving in was another hurdle. I had left most of my furniture behind at Mia's place because I couldn't deal with arranging movers while feeling like an emotional wreck. Alex and his boyfriend helped me pick up the essentials from IKEA, a bed, a small couch, and a dining table that doubles as my desk. The apartment stayed pretty sparse for weeks. I just couldn't muster the energy to make it feel like home. Work became my lifeline. I'd arrive early, leave late, and volunteer for extra projects just to avoid sitting alone in my empty apartment. My team lead noticed and started giving me more responsibilities, coordinating with other departments and training the new hire. It felt good to be needed, to be valued. About 2 months after the breakup, I ran into Nicole, Mia's cousin, at the grocery store. I almost hid behind the cereal display when I saw her, but she spotted me first. I was surprised when she actually approached me, looking genuinely uncomfortable. She told me she was sorry about what happened and that she had argued with Jake about how he treated me. It was awkward but oddly validating to hear someone from Mia's circle acknowledge that I had been wronged. That's when I first heard that things weren't going well for Mia. I thanked her for the apology but kept the conversation brief. I wasn't ready to be pulled back into that world, even peripherally. A week later, my old college roommate invited me to a party. I almost didn't go, but Alex practically pushed me out the door, insisting that I needed to remember how to be a person again. He was right, though I'd never admitted it to his face. The party was where I met Mark. He was my roommate's colleague visiting from the downtown office. We ended up in the same conversation circle, talking about random things. He asked for my number at the end of the night, and I surprised myself by giving it to him. Our first date was coffee on a Sunday afternoon, low pressure, casual. He was easy to talk to, and for the first time in months, I went hours without thinking about Mia. Mark works in a completely different field than Mia, lives in a modest apartment similar to mine, and has a refreshingly normal friend group that doesn't seem to care about networking or making the right connections. When I told him about my breakup, the condensed version, he just listened without trying to fix anything or offer platitudes. Around month 3 post-breakup, an unexpected opportunity came up at work. My company was restructuring, creating a new team, and they needed someone to take on more responsibility. My extra efforts over the previous months had apparently not gone unnoticed. My manager encouraged me to apply, though she warned me the position would involve longer hours and more stress. I almost didn't go for it, my confidence was still shaky. But I figured I had nothing to lose. The interview process was grueling, 3 rounds with various department heads, a presentation I stayed up until 2 a.m. perfecting, and a final meeting with upper management. I honestly didn't think I'd get it, there were other candidates with more experience. But 2 weeks later, my manager called me into her office to offer me the position. The promotion came with a significant raise, which meant I could finally stop stressing about making rent each month. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to start rebuilding my emergency fund, which had been depleted during the post-breakup chaos. Mia was doing okay, and if I had heard from her. He hadn't responded to my request for privacy, knowing I wouldn't want him sharing details of my life with her. I was grateful for Alex's loyalty but unsettled by Mia's sudden interest. Through mutual friends, I learned more about Mia's situation. After losing her job, she had apparently moved in with Jake temporarily while job hunting. The perfect career trajectory he had envisioned for her was crumbling, and from what I heard, he was not handling it well. I tried not to dwell on them too much. My relationship with Mark was progressing naturally, no rush, just a genuine connection. We had been seeing each other for about 2 months, taking things slow. Mark came over to my apartment regularly, helping me slowly make the space feel more like home. We installed shelves for my books one weekend and hung some artwork, the next small touches that made the place feel less temporary. My new position at work was challenging but fulfilling. Some days, I'd come home completely drained, questioning if I was up to the task, but overall, I was proud of myself for taking the leap. My team respected me, and I was finally starting to believe I deserved the opportunity. Then, last Friday, everything shifted again. I was leaving work when my phone buzzed with a notification, a voicemail from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without listening, assuming it was just another spam call about my car's extended warranty, but something made me play it. It was Jake, his voice thick with what sounded like tears. He said he'd been trying to reach me, that he needed to talk to me about Mia, that she wasn't doing well, that he had made a terrible mistake, and that he would do anything to fix things between us. 6 months ago, this man had told me I was nothing without his friend. Now he was practically begging for my help. I didn't call him back. Instead, I went to Mark's place as we had planned, but the voicemail kept playing in my head throughout the evening. Mark noticed something was off and asked what was wrong. When I told him, he didn't tell me what to do or offer solutions, he just asked what I wanted, what would give me peace. I woke up the next morning to 3 more missed calls from Jake and a text from a number I didn't recognize but assumed was Mia's new phone. I haven't opened it yet. I guess my question now is whether I should engage at all. Final update: it's been about a month since my last update, and I need to vent because things have gotten weird, like uncomfortably weird. When I ended my last post, I mentioned that Jake had left me a tearful voicemail, and I wasn't sure whether to respond. After debating for 3 days about whether to return Jake's call, I finally decided to text Mia's number, the unknown one that had texted me, with a simple message asking what was going on. I figured a text was safer than a call, easier to ignore if things got uncomfortable. Within 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes, my phone rang. It was Jake, not Mia. Apparently, he had been using her phone to contact me since I had blocked his number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. That was my first mistake. The Jake on the phone was nothing like the cold, judgmental man I remembered. His voice was shaky, almost desperate. He started by asking how I was doing, commenting on how well I looked when he saw me at the restaurant, which was still creepy, and then launched into what I can only describe as the most uncomfortable apology I've ever received. He admitted that he had been terrible to me, that he had misjudged me based on superficial factors, and that he regretted driving me away. I sat there in stunned silence as he continued explaining that Mia had been lost since our breakup, that she had spiraled after losing her job, that she had been drinking too much, and that she had made some bad financial decisions. When I finally managed to ask why he was telling me all this, his answer made my skin crawl. He thought I could help her recover because I was such a stabilizing influence. He actually said that Mia needed someone responsible like me right now. The audacity of this man to go from telling me I wasn't good enough to deciding I was exactly what his friend needed when things got tough. I told him, as calmly as I could, that I was sorry Mia was struggling but that we had been over for months. I mentioned that I was seeing someone else now. His response was a dismissive comment about how these rebound relationships rarely last and how Mia and I had real history. Then he asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss Mia's situation further. Against my better judgment and despite Mark's concerned look when I told him about it, I agreed to meet Jake at a coffee shop the following. I could put in a good word for her at my company. I was livid. I told him firmly that his behavior was inappropriate and that he needed to stop contacting me. His face crumpled, and he started crying right there in the parking lot, saying he didn't know what else to do, that Mia wasn't listening to him, and that he was desperate to help his friend. A few of my co-workers witnessed this uncomfortable scene, which was mortifying. I ended up guiding Jake to a bench away from the main entrance and told him as clearly as I could that I couldn't help him or Mia, that our relationship was over, and that he needed to respect my boundaries. He eventually left, but for the rest of the week, I received curious looks from coworkers who had seen the parking lot scene. Alex, who also worked at my company, fielded questions from people wanting to know who the crying man was. It was embarrassing and infuriating. Then Mia herself finally reached out. She sent a long text message apologizing for Jake's behavior and for how things had ended between us. She admitted she had made a huge mistake listening to Jake instead of standing up for our relationship. She said she missed me every day and had been too ashamed to contact me after everything that happened. Reading her message, I felt nothing, no flutter of lingering feelings, no satisfaction at her regret, just tiredness and a vague sense of closure. I showed the message to Mark, who read it without comment. I decided not to respond to Mia right away. I needed time to think about what, if anything, I wanted to say. But Jake didn't give me that time. He called again the next morning, asking if I had received Mia's message and what I thought about it. When I told him I thought it was inappropriate for him to be involving himself in our communication, he got defensive and said he was just trying to help. That was when something in me snapped. I told Jake, in a voice so calm it surprised even me, that I was blocking his number after this call and that if he contacted me at work again, I would report it as harassment. I added that Mia was an adult who needed to solve her own problems instead of sending her friend to fix them. Before hanging up, I added one final thought: perhaps if he had encouraged his friend to value people for their character rather than their social standing, she wouldn't be in this situation now. That evening, I finally responded to Mia's text. I told her I forgave her for how things ended because holding on to anger wasn't helping either of us, but I also made it clear that we had no future together, that I had moved on, and that she needed to do the same. I suggested she get professional help for her drinking and financial issues and that she needed to stop letting Jake fight her battles. I ended by wishing her well and asking her not to contact me again. I blocked both their numbers immediately after sending that message. It felt like closing a door that had been left ajar for too long. The next day, though, I received an Instagram DM from Jake. He had created a new account just to message me. This time, his tone was angry. He accused me of being heartless, of abandoning Mia when she needed me most. He said I was throwing away years of history out of pride. That last bit almost made me laugh, Jake talking about pride as if he hadn't destroyed our relationship with his own. I didn't respond, I just blocked that account too. But he found other ways to reach me: emails from new addresses, even a handwritten letter mailed to my apartment. Each contact was more desperate than the last. The final straw came last weekend. Mark and I were having dinner at my apartment when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mia standing there, looking disheveled and clearly having had a few drinks. Jake was hovering anxiously behind her. I was so shocked I couldn't speak at first. Mark came up behind me, asking who was at the door, and the look on Mia's face when she realized I had someone else there was almost pitiful. What followed was awkward and uncomfortable. Mia tried to talk about our past, about how much she regretted her choices. Jake kept interjecting with comments about how good we were together. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I stepped into the hallway and closed the door partially behind me. I told Mia, as gently but firmly as I could, that this wasn't appropriate, that showing up unannounced at my home crossed a serious boundary, and that I had meant what I said in my message about moving on. Mia's response surprised me. She turned to Jake and said this was exactly why she hadn't wanted to come, that she had told him this would only make things worse.